Hi, my name is Kirk Hamilton. This is the Staying Healthy Today show, and we review things that help people stay well, the individual, society, the world. And I have one of my dear friends and colleagues, Doctor. Well, he is a doctor of photography,
Yeah.
Michael Desmond, a doctor of photography and mind-body meditation and healing. But I wanted to ask you, you've been a photographer for a long time, obviously, and I've watched you grow through the ranks. On a if you could give 5 tips to a beginning photographer that was going to do commercial stuff like you, what would you tell them?
Five tips. Five tips to do what? Just to how to
Keep,
go
to
about it.
keep at it. Yeah, to keep at it.
Uh, Number one that comes to mind is just having a clarity on what it is that you want to go after. I guess and
Did you have
make it.
clarity when you started that
I
time you
did.
took your
I did. It's
you
funny
hopped on the
because
movie set?
I snuck onto the movie set, and it was funny because before then I was shooting weddings and different things, but would see on the end of movies, which I used to watch a lot of, they'd always have a still photographer on the credits. I was like, that's what I want to do, be a
Wow.
photographer on the movie sets. And so when I knew that there was that movie happening in Sacramento, I knew that I was going to sneak onto that set somehow and meet the still photographer, and that's what I did. So, and to this
So you
day,
have to have
30 years
some
later, we're good friends.
intestinal fortitude, let me put it politely, or guts. You know what I want to say,
Yeah,
to
no,
do
no,
that.
that helps. And then just, the willingness to keep your creativity alive through all the obstacles and to keep going, not quit.
How did meditation help you in your photography occupation? Not just taking pictures, but let's just stay with the occupation. How did meditation help you keep going?
Meditation for me would help and keep the creativity alive by staying present. And I realized for me, creativity, it's not that it can't exist, but I think true creativity can only be derived from present moment. Um, Being present, because otherwise it's just you're always in a place of past or future and stress or worry, and it becomes very difficult to create in that situation. Also, I
So
would say,
applying,
what's that?
go ahead. Go ahead.
I would say the second thing for me that meditation has helped with is breaking free from you know the identities that one would have with certain things, and making separation with that, and realizing that that's not who you are, and that's also not where your creativity comes from. So it's part of it. So aside from economic challenges or getting your door slammed in your face or being told no and all the things that might go on in your head and react in those ways, the meditation part helps create space in that way
What
of
were
looking at things.
what was one of the funniest things that happened to you on a set, but turned out to be one of the greatest things that ever happened to you on a set?
That's a tough one. I can think of a lot
There's
of
a lot.
funny things that happened, but things that ended up turning out okay. I would like the one of the things that comes to my mind is working with an actor at the time where on the day I was told not to make eye contact or talk to this particular actor when I was photographing him, and and at the time the crew knew that by me being there on set with a camera that I was going to get yelled at. They didn't say anything to me. It was more of a hazing thing. So as we started to roll, I brought the camera up to my face. I'm sitting right next to the camera, and the camera guys are all watching. And sure enough, the actor that I was photographing yells and screams at me and says, you have to leave the set. You can't shoot during the take." And and the first AD came over and they put me into another room on the other side of the wall. And they started to roll again, and that actor yelled at me again and said, "I know you're still here." And the first AD came out into the other room and then literally took me out of the soundstage and had me stand in the parking lot. And I thought for sure I was done. I was, never going to shoot for this show again. And so shortly after, I had one of somebody came up to me. I don't know who it was, and said, "Hey, listen, we're gonna break for lunch here, but just do me a favor. Don't say anything to this person. Don't make eye contact with them. Don't try to like work anything out with them. Just let them be." And then a few seconds after that, the publicist had come up to me and she ran out and she said, "I'm so sorry about that. That just it was just awful. I'm sure that was just the most embarrassing thing. But and I'm sorry I have to ask, but did you get the shot?" And I said, "Yes, I got the shot." And it ended up being like the main shot that I was there to get, and the publicist was also there that day just to ensure that I was going to get that shot. And then not even 5 minutes later, the actor started walking out to go to lunch, and I beelined it for him. I went straight to him.
Which was totally against what everybody would have thought you would have done.
Everybody told me not to do that.
Right. They're
And then
closing their eyes, waiting for the big bombshell.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I went right up to him and I said, "Look, I apologize. I didn't realize that, there was an issue with, shooting during the takes." And he goes, "No, no, no, I'm the one that's sorry. I was just completely uncalled for. I didn't mean to yell at you or embarrass you." And he says, "You know what?" He says, "We're all good." And he puts his arm around me and literally had his arm around me on the entire walk to lunch. And everybody's looking like, "Oh my God, there's a photographer with, you know, that
So and so.
actor." Yeah, so and so, and everybody's just, and I could tell everyone's just going, "Oh shit, what is happening?" But the funny thing is that it turned out, and he says, says, "I know you have a job to do," and I said, "Yeah," and I said, "If it's possible, what would it look like for me to be able to continue getting what it is that I need on my end, and how can we achieve that? Is there something that we could work out?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, "Absolutely." He says, "Why don't you shoot the rehearsal, and if for some reason they don't do a rehearsal, you come to me, and then I'll do a setup for you, and just stand by close." And I said, "Perfect, done and done, and I'll always communicate with you before every take." And so from that day on, I ended up shooting the rest of the TV shows that he ended up doing for the next few years because I was, the one he would request to be on set.
That's,
Um,
that's,
and that
that is
and
such
that
a
it,
miracle.
and that ended up launching, I would say, not per se my career, but it definitely helped because I earned this reputation of being able to work with the most difficult of actors, and that word got out after that, and I ended up
So on
becoming
that
pretty
point,
busy.
just stay
Yeah,
with that one because that's the pearl. How do you
yeah.
work with a difficult act? What is it in you that allows you to work with the difficult actors?
Never take anything personally, and I literally just I just recognize that everybody has their way, and I'll always introduce myself and ask if there's anything that I can do to make it easy for them, and communicate. But that's not always the case. There's been some actors who just, no matter what I did, just it was just a battle, not a battle, but it was just one of those things where it takes a certain amount of again, this is where the meditation helps. I would say it takes a certain amount of presence. A, not to take it personally. B, just to be able to have a sensitivity to other people's energy and where they're at, and how to just be very aikido like, in terms of evading and just being invisible and knowing when to make yourself visible and when to pull back and get a couple frames, got what I need, and then walk away. And it's just a delicate balance.
And even though that was years ago, did you meditate every morning, like even for 5 minutes before you would go do something like that? I mean, just as a
back
regular practice?
back then it was more of sporadic. I don't think it
Mhm.
back then it was as consistent as it is today or now or the last however many years. But back then, my meditation for me was when I moved to Los Angeles. One of the main agreements that I'd made for myself was that I had to live within walking distance to the beach, which I knew was also going to be a little bit more expensive, in terms of the economics of, moving from Sacramento to Los Angeles to live somewhere where I could walk to the beach. But that was key for me because the walks on the beach for me was my meditation and just connecting with nature and having that presence and that silence and the space to allow ideas to come in and or for problem solving and recentering so that when I
So,
went back out I was impervious to the rejections
so
that I was
now
getting in the beginning.
you're actually doing walking meditations
Yeah,
unbeknownst to you.
unbeknownst to me at the time, because back then, that was 25 years ago or whatever it was. I had my idea of meditation was this formal thing where I had to sit and you know take the time and whatever. But unbeknownst to me, the walks on the beach and that connection with nature and the waves and whatnot, that was
Yeah.
very much a daily practice for me, multiple times a day.
So lastly, all right, you're obviously a few years older than you were then. Um, and your meditation practice is probably a little different.
Very,
What is
yeah.
it that you want? You're established in your career, but maybe you still want to evolve to a different place.
Always.
How are you using meditation to get you to the next level of your life through photography?
I don't per se see it as getting to a next level.
Hmm.
I just see meditation. It's wild. I think now I view meditation as more, it becomes, it's a very simple thing. For me, meditation is just about awareness. And the moment you are aware that you're aware and are able to recognize that, you're you're meditating in my view. And however that works for you, whether you're going on a run or walk and having some sort of reflection and awareness that okay, I am aware that I'm aware, and that from that point gives you a sense of uh, freedom. It creates a space between your thoughts and who you think you are, and from that space, creativity is born, and ideas can come in, and problems can be solved, or your change of
Awesome.
perspective. Because problems I don't really think is more of I think problems are more of a perspective thing than it is an actual problem. So yeah.
Do you think you'll be doing well, first, will you be doing photography in 10 years as a profession? And then do you think it will be a different form, take on a different form?
Yeah, it's funny. I have this idea of mindfulness through photography, which I have not implemented yet, but I have numerous notes and ideas of how to go about doing that. For example, when you look through the lens of the camera, how are you going to frame up what it is that you see, and the ability to reframe, what you're looking at. Whereas Wayne Dyer would say, change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change.
Mhm.
Um, there's a certain mindfulness that goes into that, or even just the lens in which you view life. If you're looking at life through fear, and or thinking that things are not going to be okay, then if you're looking through that lens, then everything that you see throughout the day is going to give evidence to that sense of fear and or things aren't going to be okay. Where conversely, if you put the lens on where you're looking through life as, everything in the universe is working for me and, it's all good, then as you go throughout your day, you will find evidence that everything is working for you and that everything is all good, you know? So that's part of the mindfulness part of the photography, just in terms of like, examining like how is it that you're looking through life, looking at life, like whereas you're taking a photograph, you want to like you know be conscious of what it is that you're seeing through your lens.
Hey, I think that that is a pretty good wrap from my beloved friend and if the audience ever heard this, they would know that I have seen so many of these funny little anecdotes over 30 years or 25 years. I've
Many
heard
of
the best.
stories, yes.
So, Michael, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank
And for
you.
this edition of Staying Healthy Today show, God bless everybody. Be well.
Thank you, man.